Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much for signing up for the webinar and attending live. I know there's always a temptation for people to sign up for webinars. It's kind of an optimistic view of how much time they'll have in the future. So I always appreciate the 100 of you or so who have signed up and attend live. Today, we're going to talk about offer architecture. So how do we craft successful consulting packages from scratch? But before we do that, I'm going to give a very quick introduction of who I am. But I feel like I do these two things in my life. There's the community consulting side, which is my practice, which I run every day, which is my main source of income. And then there's this, which I began doing a couple of years ago, right after the pandemic. There were a lot of tech layoffs in the space, and I had all these people reaching out to me, asking me, like, how to become a consultant? What should I charge? How do I attract clients? And I was writing these long messages back. And then I suddenly realized that I could just create a newsletter and just share what I've learned and what I continue to learn today. And that's what I've been doing for, I think, around 3 years now. And then even this has been developed into its own thing where I offer coaching and courses and things that I'll talk about at the end of this webinar today. If you don't know much about me, like I run a consultancy called Feverbee. And what we essentially do is help organizations develop great communities of employees, customers, and any other audience that they might be engaging with. And over the last 16 years now, I've been lucky enough to work with most of the major tech brands in the world, like Apple, Facebook, Google, SAP, published a bunch of books and done other great things. And I've learned so much during that journey that I'm really eager to share today and also get some of your expertise and wisdom as well, because definitely I don't have a monopoly on it by any stretch of the imagination. Like, for example, when I began my practice, it began as just a blog like this. In 2008, this was what my entire practice looked like. It was basically just a blog where I just shared advice about how to build a community. And over time, that just grew and developed, and I had people reaching out to me for work and support. And today it looks very different from where we began. And there's a whole journey there and a lot of mistakes that we've made. And I think over the last 16 years, I think we've made £5 million UK. So I think that's around, what's that, 7 million US, somewhere around that kind of level. And I don't share that to brag, but it's more because there's a lot of advice I read from people who either don't seem to be doing consulting themselves or don't have any evidence that what they do works. So I want to share everything about what I do and try and be as transparent as I possibly can during the journey. I've also been able to speak at a bunch of events, and I'm going to take you through what my process looks like, how we craft offers, and try and unpick where some of the very common advice is what I think completely wrong and what actually works in the modern reality of consulting today. Hopefully, you take away a couple of great ideas from this session. Hopefully, there'll be points during the session where I challenge some of the things that you do believe, because I think that's an important journey to go through. But that's really what I'm keen to do today, to like challenge where we're at and just make sure that everyone has an understanding of what are some principles you can to answer the key questions that we have today. So let's begin with the very obvious one. And some of you kind of answered it already. What service should you offer? If you're a consultant, how do you even decide what service to offer? What I see time and time again with the people I coach and mentor is there's this initial mindset, which is something like, I'm a strategy consultant. Hire me, please. And then they go around, they don't have a lot of luck, and soon they're back in employment. And the problem with this is that a lot of organizations aren't looking for strategies. Very often they want to do that in-house as well. And I think a lot of consultants aren't clear enough in what is the actual problem that they're solving. So when we think about this, we try to put a few principles in place. One is we want to be very clear, what is the audience that we serve? If you read my newsletter, you know I spend a lot of time talking about a niche, or if you're in the US, a niche. I hate that expression of it so much, but I'll use it here today just for the Americans amongst us. But we try to be very clear, what is the audience that we serve? And I'm not going to focus on that today because I think that comes up so often. But I am going to go through the next 3 steps, which is what is the problem we actually solve? What is the value that we offer? And then what are the deliverables that we create? I think quite frequently when consultants aren't as successful as they should be, I think it's because they're not solving the right problem at the moment. Very often they try to solve problems that are so big that they're in the domain of the big and management consulting firms, and you're really not going to win when you're up against them at a one-to-one level. Or they focus on issues that are just too small and too narrow that the organization doesn't really spend enough money on in the first place. So we try to zero in on what we call the 6 to 7 figure issues. So when we think about the kind of problems that we solve and the deliverables that we create, we focus at this very beginner level, which is there's a lot of discrepancy here and flexibility, but broadly, if you're doing in B2B sales, if you're consulting in a B2B capacity, I know that some of you are doing B2C, so hopefully you can adapt this. But there's certain things that you help the client do and certain things you don't. And I think we can generally, not always, but generally break these down into 6 specific areas. One is helping the client decide what to do. This is where your value is typically analyzing options to recommend the best one. The deliverables here will include things like evaluating the current situation, competitive benchmarking, future models, case studies, recommendations, like really helping the client make the big strategic decisions about what to do. In my space, for example, we're often hired to help our clients decide what vendor should they host their community on. And this is usually a vendor they might spend over $1 million on over the course of the contract. So this isn't a small issue and they want to get it right. And so there's a set of templates and resources and deliverables that we create to help them make that decision. 2 is where they know what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And this is usually where you start creating a plan tailored to the organization's unique situation. This is where you start looking at process maps, implementation roadmaps, integration plans, standard operating procedures, all these things. But it's not just helping them decide what to do. It's making sure they know how to do it. 3 is where they know what to do, they know how to do it, but they don't have the ability to do it. And this is where your role is to improve the abilities and performance of staff. So this will look like stakeholder engagement programs, training, change management, these kind of things. Maybe organizational design, you might get involved a little bit in that. But you're just building their ability to execute the plan that you've put together that's based on their initial decision. 4 is where we go a little bit out of that thread and they're already doing something, but they want to do it better. They want better results. They want to sweat the assets that they have. And this is where a lot of people think all of consulting is kind of based around, which is you swan in, you share your wisdom and your expertise, you improve things, and then you just drift away. And I think so many people have a misguided idea of what consulting is. It's not sharing advice and expertise, not usually. It's usually creating the deliverables that are going to help clients achieve the things they need to do. So in this capacity, it might be customer journey maps, efficiency audits, benchmarking, evaluation of staff, training materials, revising the processes or playbooks, things that help the client achieve their goals even better. The 5th one is avoiding mistakes. This doesn't come up so often in my line of work, but I know people in this space who make a tremendous amount of money because organizations have almost an infinite capacity to invest in projects to help them avoid costly mistakes. So here you're ensuring compliance with regulations and mitigating risks. And the final one is monitoring the performance, so showing results. This represents honestly a tiny fraction of our work. We don't do it as often as I would like, mostly because organizations don't tend to invest a lot of money on checking if something worked, which is a real shame because they really, really should. We usually hear you analyzing the data to evaluate results, and you see KPIs and dashboards, performance reports, employee performance metrics, performance improvement plans, all these kinds of things. Does this make sense? Like, does this resonate with some of the work that you do? Maybe take half a minute and put your answer in chat. I'm curious, out of these, which one do you do the most? What category are you in the most for your work? What do we have here? Risk management, process improvements. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Try not to use the numbers if you can help it. It makes me have to check the chart. Organization development, all but 1. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, it's perfectly possible to do all these things, but I think whenever you get a request from a client, whenever you engage with a client in the early stage of that sales process, you have to know which of the six are you actually doing. Are you helping the client decide what to do, knowing how to do it, building their ability to do it, doing it better? And even once you start understanding this, you can start structuring your offers to be like, okay, first we're going to do this, then this, then this. And there's a very logical flow that goes down this. Let's see what I have here. Glenda says different category, but they know what to do. It's based on bad assumptions. Yeah. Thank you for your kind comments. I appreciate that. Jason says my clients think they know how to do it, but they lack the ability to do it. First 5 columns. Yeah. I think it's also very important to know how to match the deliverables to what you're doing. A lot of the people I've coached, they don't quite get this alignment right. And often they have these propositions and offers. They're actually quite vague. And we want to make things that are very clear, very specific. And so once we know which category the client is in, then we can go down and be like, okay, which of these are going to have the biggest impact? Now, we can't do all of these things for you. And this isn't a comprehensive list by any measure whatsoever, but it gives you some idea of what might make sense to you and what you're offering. And even if you just get this one thing right, and we're going to go a lot deeper into this, you'll be doing better than most people at the moment. So I've covered this question already, but hopefully this gives you an idea. Like, get the critical question right of what you're helping the client do. Make sure you're clear about what your unique value is, and then get the deliverables to match. You do this, you're doing a lot better than most. The next thing is deciding your pricing tiers. What I should mention is that everything I'm teaching you on sharing today comes from our Consulting Foundations program, which I'll talk more about at the end of the session. So, decide your pricing tiers. How many of you have heard of value-based fees? Quick yes or no. Would someone like to explain what that is in one sentence? Value-based fees gets talked about an awful lot by consultants in all the books, the Alan Weiss stuff. Basically, it's a simple principle that some people have articulated here, where instead of charging a fixed amount based on your time, you charge a percentage of the value that's delivered. Exactly what Mark is saying here. So an example of this would be, let's say you think that your project will generate a return in some way of 100 million, let's just say just 1 million for a client. So you might look at that and say, well, it's going to generate return of 1 million for you. So we will charge 100 grand. Can anyone articulate what the problem with this approach is? What's the problem with base fees? There's actually a bunch. So we have defining the value that you created, variables for success, attribution, hard to define. Yeah, that's definitely one. Make sure as well that when you chat, you select chat to everyone, not just to me. Outcomes not immediate. Clients do not think you're worth it. Okay, here's my take on value-based fees, because I've tried it in different ways, different capacities. You should not use it. And the best way of thinking about this is like a plumber. Let's say there's a small leak in your roof, and a plumber comes and says, well, if you don't fix that leak, that's going to collapse the entire roof. Replacing that will be 55 grand. So I'm going to charge you 5 grand to repair that roof. Would that be a good deal for you? Would you pay that amount to fix the leak? What would you do instead? What would you do instead? You would shop around. Of course you would. Absolutely. You would shop around. And that's the big problem with value-based fees. Value-based fees can work tremendously well if you're the only game in town. They don't work at all for many reasons. They don't work because you can't measure most projects by the dollar value return. They don't work very well because you have competitors. If you're charging 100 grand and they charge 20 or 30, who's going to get the project? They don't work because it shifts the risk onto the client. What happens if you don't succeed? You still get paid, right? but they don't get the results. And the other one, at a certain point, usually beyond around the 50K level, big fees become RFPs. And as a solo consultant, yes, you can win them, but you're far less likely to win them. And these conversations end up a little bit like this. The consultants say, like, this project will generate 1 million in returns for you. Our fee is 100 grand. It's a bargain for you. And the prospect will be, that seems rather high, requires an RFP. Do you charge less if we don't achieve the outcome? Then the consultant's like, God, no, you have to trust me. Of course I'm going to deliver on it. And then your competitor will be like, that's insane. For this is 30 grand. Who's going to get that deal? Who's going to get that deal? Oh yeah, RFP, request for proposal. And so you have to avoid this kind of mindset. Yes, it gets talked about a lot, but it's not really a practical way of setting your fees. The other bad way to do it is where you get to that point where you have to name your fee and you try and get the highest number a client is willing to pay. How many of you take this approach today? How many of you play that? Be honest, how many of you play the game of guessing the highest number you think a client is willing to pay? Interesting that some of you are saying no. I think there's this fear that if you don't charge the highest you possibly can, that you're leaving money on the table. And it's a ridiculous way of like thinking about fees and pretty much everything else, to be honest. If you don't know what to charge, like if you fundamentally don't know what to charge, you don't have a problem with setting fees. You have a problem at the strategy level. And to solve that, you have to understand what the general pricing tiers are. Now, the pricing tiers might vary somewhat by different organizations and approaches. Like they might vary in the sector you're in. But what I found to be true, there's 7 general buckets. And once you know what tier you're in, everything becomes a lot easier. There's a question here like, Colin, how do you find out what your competitors charge? Well, you can just ask. You can pretend to be a client and ask. Like, there's different ways of doing it. But honestly, I think the easiest way is if you find that your prospect goes with a competitor at any point, ask why. If it's the budget reason, then usually you have an idea of what they charge. Okay, let's begin with the tiers. At the very lowest level is that 1 to 5K level. This is where your clients are usually quite small and you have these turnkey solutions and you do like a dozen or 2 of them a year. But the key thing here is everything is automated. Just above that, you have that 5 to 10K bucket where it's kind of key. And by that, I mean, you're not really adapting the solution to each client. You have a process, the client is buying that process from you, and you're not really customizing it to them. So everything here will be templated and you can make a living at this level. 3 is where I think most consultants begin to play. This is where you're in that 10K to 25K bucket. You're usually at mid-tier, large kind of company here, and you're developing specialized projects for mid to large organizations. And again, you need a couple of them a year to make a living. I think 4 is the minimum, like the bare minimum that you can survive on. 10 is probably where most people like want to be. But again, here, the sales process is more customized at this situation. It's more in a situation where you have a discussion and negotiation, you learn more about them, and you start adapting your deliverables and services that we just talked about into this specific situation. Question here from Mark, are these monthly, annual, or client lifetime? I'm imagining it from a single project that you sell. I'm not talking so much about retainer-based clients on this one, and I can explain why a bit later on, but at a per project basis at the moment. For multiple projects, this is where you're selling a project at 25 to 50K. And again, a lot more customization is required here. You're individualizing almost the entire approach and what clients actually get. And then you get the 50K to 100K. Here you get into that level where a lot of projects are going to need a request for proposal. And you might start thinking about breaking down the project into sub 50K parts so you don't get hit with that RFP situation. But you're really developing the service to the unique needs of clients. Above 100K, it is possible as a solo consultant to get these kinds of projects, but it's rare. Like we haven't done it, or I haven't done it that many times over the years for sure. And then you have like the long-term big agency stuff that I'm not going to talk too much about at all. Now, I think a lot of people will look at a chart like this and think, okay, I need to be as far to the right-hand side as possible. And I don't think that's actually the way you should be thinking about this. The right way to think about this is this. You have to be very good at whichever tier you're in. I know people doing turnkey projects that are making over $1 million a year because they're so good at it and their strategy is designed for that. Charging more doesn't necessarily mean you will earn more over the long term. You have to accept all the conditions and situation that charging more entails. Now, if you're doing retainer-based work, that's a different thing. I can talk more about that a bit later on. But if you're charging per the project, you have to decide which sandpit that you're playing in and get really good at that. Does this make sense? A question for you, like for the projects that you do, what kind of fees do you typically charge, if you're willing to share? What kind of fees do you typically charge? We have 5 to 10, 5 to 10. Interesting that 5 to 10K is coming up. I do think for 5 to 10K, it's harder, honestly. For most of the people I've worked with, you need at least 5-figure projects to thrive. I think it's very hard to make a really good living at the 5 to 10K level. What else is 10K? By the way, it's all based on like Western fees. If you're in Asia or India or somewhere else, your schema would be completely different from this. Mickey says 10 to 25K, 10 to 25, some 50 to 100. Okay. Yeah. I think generally, like for a lot of you, you do have to be in that 10K to 50K space. Yeah. Yeah, retainer base is a different field entirely. I found over the years that clients are less willing to accept retainer based fees than what they used to. But if it works for you, that's fantastic. But yeah, just keep this in mind. Like these figures don't have to be exact and it'll be different for your situation. And you can adjust it to retainer base if you want. But just be very aware of like what sandpit you're playing in here because the rules are very different. And the rules of like below 10K are very different from that 10K to 50K level. And it's very different once you go above 50K and very different once you go above 100K. And your reputation starts to matter more than your sales process. And there's so many things that start becoming involved once you move up these tiers. So you do want to get to a decent sized tier, 100%. But you don't have to go as far as you possibly can. You just need to be in that niche or niche where you can really thrive. The other great thing about this is that negotiation is a lot easier when you know what your pricing tiers are. I have a principle when I negotiate with clients, which is I use what I call the zero in approach, which I think the very worst thing you can possibly do with a client is go through the whole process of negotiation and then give a quote and they experience this sticker shock where they're, oh, we didn't know it's going to be this expensive. That's out of our budget, which means you just wasted all of your time. And that doesn't make sense for anyone whatsoever. What we've developed instead is a process where we take clients on a journey and we begin with a very broad range, which we put on our website. So every request that we get, people know roughly how much that we charge. And then once we start learning more about them, that's when we zero in a little more. Once we define what the problem is, we might have a rough range for what that charges, for what we'll charge for that. And then we can go a little bit deeper once we know what the solutions are, as in what the deliverables are, what we're creating for them. Then we have a rough range, and then we can create the options within that. Does this make sense? Like, I think if you're going to negotiate, it doesn't happen at the end. It's all part of the journey. So you have to make sure at each stage the client understands what that range is. So there's never any sticker shock at all. And everyone always knows roughly what they're likely to pay. And you can adjust as you go along. So for example, on my website, I put these rates right on that. I'm very, very clear about what we're likely to charge, what your rough range should be. And you notice this is incredibly broad. Like it's incredibly broad, but it just means that I'm not dealing with organizations that are just completely out of the range, or maybe they're expecting a lot more or a lot less. Dave asked the question, do you communicate the zeroing fees along the way as you go? Yeah, so at each stage, if I go back, the discovery phase, like they know once they complete this, that what our rough range is. And by the way, just putting this on the form eliminated so much time I used to waste with people that didn't have any budget. The definition, once we understand what the problem is we're trying to solve, I give them a rough range of what that's likely to cost. And they have to accept that. Otherwise, I don't move on to the next stage because it doesn't make sense, and so on and so forth. So the only difference in the proposal is that they have very clear options that they can aim for. And then very often we get some requests that are just great. We get some requests that are just like this, where, hey, do you have any capacity to engage with us now? We've got money, 75K. They're putting that just up there. And like emails like this are emails I absolutely love because the negotiation is really easy. They're clearly very interested in working specifically with me. And these are the kind of messages that we get when we're very clear about what our pricing tiers are for different kinds of work. And what we're going to focus on for the rest of this session today are these two areas here and what tends to happen. So we spoke about pricing ranges already, so I'm not going to ask that again. What I'm going to talk about now that we have an idea of what the deliverables are and what the pricing is, we're going to talk about how we package these services up. You might want to zoom in your screen here. I didn't have time to change the graphic to be widescreen, so sorry about that. But hopefully if you zoom in or maximize your screen, you can see what I'm going through. So even when you have your packages, even if you know what the rough range is, you have to learn how to create that package in exactly the right way. Because there's ways of doing it that are right and ways of doing it that are wrong. What a lot of consultants do at the moment will have in all their marketing and promotion and everything else will be something along the lines of, I'm a great consultant, hire me. But clients are better at buying solutions to the problems that they have. And if you are a fantastic and well-known brand name, yeah, it might make sense to mention you for sure, but to do that alongside what the solutions are. And the solution might be a 3-month team training package or comprehensive CRM migration. But the first rule I'd say is sell a service, not yourself. Sell a service, not yourself. Jeff is talking about, do you sell outcomes or the service offered? You'll see as I go through this, what we actually sell. From Lynn, do you have a point of view on sharing a range as you have here versus starting at? I like the range. It's easy to say just starting at, but I think a range just makes things a lot easier because it just highlights what their budget should be. And it's also very clear that I'm not trying to gouge them for money. Rule number 2, name your service to reflect the benefits clients want. We'll talk about the language maybe just after this, but it's one thing to say, this is a 3-month team training package. This is going to the question I think Jeff mentioned just a second ago. It's another thing to say, management to leadership program, skills to improve your team's collaboration, efficiency, and morale. Do you see the difference here? There's a big difference in the naming of one thing versus the other. And the names and the wording, they do really matter. We've tried this with the largest companies in the world. We've found that how you name things, how you name the services in the package that you create really do matter. So 3, this is targeted particularly at the Americans in the audience because I've found you folks love your superlatives and adjectives. Oh, there's a typo there. Sorry about that. But you love your superlatives and adjectives more than anything else. But we've found is they tend to breed suspicion. So we could say seamless CRM transition, unlock effortless data integration, boost sales efficiency, and improve customer retention. Once it starts to sound like an ad, people would treat it like an ad. And so what we might say instead is just describe what it is very clearly. So it might be fully outsourced CRM migration, data preparation, platform configuration, etc., etc. The difference is that this hints of what the benefits are. Like fully outsourced means that you don't have to get involved. We're going to take care of this on your behalf. But we don't need to drift into the world of superlatives because people don't believe them. Rule number 4, once you have that, is it's usually a good idea to create multiple options for clients. Very often clients don't know what their budget is. That can be a real pain. And the way to get around that is to design multiple options at different price points within your range that can work for them. And I think a lot of us do this already, but when we tend to use it, we tend to do this gold, silver, bronze. I always find gold, silver, bronze a little bit weak and sometimes hard to tell what the differences are between them. I think the options should be really clear what the differences are. So here, option 1, fully outsourced CRM implementation. That's where you hand it to us. You can relax. We're going to take care of this on your behalf. Option 2, where it's collaborative. Option 3, where it's a rapid 2-week CRM launch. You notice here there's a big difference between speed and effort. And so we create these options and design these options for these situations. But the key thing is that whatever options that you're designing is that they're very clear for the client what the difference is. I used to use the Alan Weiss proposal template. That's something like consulting, advisory, maybe implementation. And clients would always look at this and be like, wait, what's the difference between these? And I found just doesn't work that well. But when you design your options and you name your options, so it's very crystal clear what the differences are, clients tend to respond to that a lot better. And also be mindful here that a lot of clients, the people who will pay for you, the people that sign off on the checks, might be people that you don't speak to in the journey at all. There might be a procurement person that you don't know that's going to have to know what the difference is. So it's important that you communicate as well. And then the final thing I would recommend here is to create an option, a recommended option to avoid decision fatigue. I really would recommend that you create a recommended option and do it honestly. Don't just do the most expensive one because you want as much money as possible. I think there's a very good way to build trust by not always recommending the highest tier one, but give a recommended option based on what you know about the client. Let me quickly pause here to check if you have any questions at all. Does this make sense? Is everyone still with me? We're going through a lot of information today, but I'll share the recording and the webinar, of course. Okay, I think we're good. So typically I would ask here, what are your options? But I'm actually not going to do that just because I want to go through the journey a little bit more. We've got a lot of slides still want to get through. Parinder asked a question. So the last recommendation would happen only after the scope is defined. Yeah, this happens if you think about that do in technique before. Once you know what the possible solutions are, there's always a decision of how much the consultant is going to do versus the client, or if you're going to do the implementation, if you're just going to diagnose what the options are. So I'll go through that in a little more depth right now. Now we're going to go to a more advanced level, which is how do we collaboratively design the exact solution for a client? I found everyone thinks they're very good at listening to what a client wants, but they're not always as good as what they think they are. If we go back to these tiers here, I want you to get into the habit of, regardless of what problem you've been given, asking the 100K plus questions, where you give them specific questions or you go through those questions yourself to really make sure they are tackling the right problem in the first place. And the first question is this: does the client have the right goal? Like when they approach you with what their goal is the goal aligned to the current trends, the expertise you have? Is it ambitious enough? I really believe in the sales process. You should be educating the client. Like when I show up to a sales call with a client, often I'm sharing the latest in industry trends and information that I know is going to educate them and help them understand like where the industry is going and seeing if their goal is aligned with that trend. We're going to check whether their goal will give them a competitive advantage or not, whether they could be more ambitious with the opportunities or technologies that are out there to future-proof themselves. So with whatever they want to achieve, actually do a quick check and go through his journey, check if they do have the right goal or whether they need to be more ambitious. Very often when we create options beyond what they initially wanted in the first place, just because we know that they can be more ambitious. 2, is it the right problem to achieve that goal? Like very often a client will say, my problem is this, and we will do some research and be like, actually, that's not what's stopping you from achieving your goal. That's why you always need to know not just what the problem is, but what the actual goal is. So here you evaluate what the problem is. You might test your hypothesis. You might keep going deeper to find what the root cause is. Sometimes you do this as part of the consultancy process of an initial engagement, perhaps, but it's an important question to think about. Is the client tackling the right problem? Is the problem that they think is going to achieve their goal? Will it really help them achieve their goal? 3, is the client taking the right approach to the problem itself? This is where you think about the stakeholder needs, goals, and priorities. Like there's no point in making a recommendation or changing something that you can't change. They often hear there are things I would love to do, but I know that the IT team doesn't have the ability to do it or the bandwidth to do it for now. So we have to adapt our approach accordingly. So engaging stakeholders, comparing what the competing options are. So go through these kinds of questions, because very often you'll find that first, that you're solving the wrong problem in the first place, or you're not achieving the right goal. But second, it'll often open up doors to other ways you can help and support your client. And that is obviously going to benefit you because they might hire you to do that kind of work. And even if they don't, when you educate them, when you support them, when you give them more information, they're going to trust you a lot more as a result. So now you know what the key issues are. I wanted to guide you through the full diagnosis to think about when you're designing solutions for clients. Again, sometimes we do this part of the consultancy process itself, and sometimes part of the sales cycle. It really just depends on many things. So this is where we enter the world of what I call solution design. Very often you have a situation like this. The problem, the organization knows what they want. That's the issue. And the example might be high rate of churn in the customer trial period leading to slowing growth rates. What's the next thing that you would think about here? If that's the problem the organization has given you, what's the next thing that you would be thinking about here? Quickly put your answer in chat. Cause of the issue? Yeah, that's definitely one. Honestly, there isn't a exact answer, but there's a couple of things that you can be thinking about as well. UX redesign, UX audit. So before you start figuring out what services or deliverables that you're going to create, the next thing I want you to be thinking about is knowledge. How much do they know about the possible solutions that are out there? There's no point in recommending things if your client knows nothing about it. Do they have any research or idea of what's causing churn or common solutions? Do they actually know what the problem is, what's causing it? Some of you kind of touched upon this, the root cause. I don't really mind which order you're doing in, but do they know what the issue is, what's causing it? High rate of churn, you can jump into many different ways to solve that. Try to avoid that. The next thing I think about is what time and resources are available. Like it's very easy to dive in and propose a plan that will take a year to implement for them. But what if your contact has to show results within this quarter? Well, that changes the deliverables you create entirely. So now you start to see how things begin to become more clear. So in this case, it might be needs a rapid solution to show improvement on a limited budget. That completely changes everything, right? Next is what is your contact's personal situation? I'll talk more about this in a second, but it's one thing if your contact is juggling multiple projects at once and wants someone they can outsource this problem to. So another thing entirely if they want to be closely involved. That's a different service entirely. We looked at this before when we looked at the options. That's a completely different service. And finally, what's happening in the environment? Like, are there any major trends or issues here to be thinking about? Maybe in this case, it's a big push to incorporate AI into the major projects that we do. Now, if this is what you have, what are the deliverables you would be thinking about for them? Take maybe 20 seconds and put your answer in chat. What are the deliverables you would be thinking about for them? It's really important to actually investigate these kind of things before you begin jumping into what deliverables you're going to create, what the solution is, because this kind of information completely changes what you should be offering them. And also, if you're in a competitive process against other consultants, I guarantee that you will win if your proposal considers these kinds of things. So what do we have? Do customer feedback insights, declare what high churn is. Clarity. Okay, people are struggling with this one. Interesting. So when I think about the deliverables for a project like this, if this was a client of ours, I'd be thinking about this. First, I might give it a prioritized list of what causes churn, ranked by the immediacy and budget. So you can see what will lead into this as well. So now they know what is actually causing churn, and then they can start thinking about what problems to solve. Two, because they want AI in these kind of things, I'm going to include practical steps to incorporate AI into solutions. Again, best practices, examples from other organizations where AI can be implemented into solutions, what the outcome will look like, potential risks, all these kinds of things. And finally, I'll give them an implementation plan to reduce churn. This will include what partners to use, the scope of work, how much it's likely to cost, the project management to lead the implementation of solution. Give them a simple go or no go for launch. So my contact be like, yeah or no. And so it's very easy for them. Now, does this make sense? You see how everything begins to connect together. It's really easy to jump to the deliverables without properly exploring what the full situation is. Okay, is everyone still with me here? It's gone very quiet in chat. Don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, but go through this journey, like really go through this journey with clients. Like it's such an important thing to do. Okay. So do the full diagnosis before you suggest solutions. One more thing I'll cover before I wrap things up, and I'll do this quite quickly, but it's very important, is to think about the language that people use as well. I'm going to skip these examples because I think you kind of get the idea, but you can grab the slides later on if you want. So when we structure the options, just to go back to this actually, there's different ways of naming what these options are, but usually we have some version of like diagnose, stabilize, fix a symptom, like a low budget, a mid budget, and a high budget option. Yours might be more compressed or more or larger. But what we often do actually is give like what our ideal situation would be if there was an ability to have like a long-term benefit. We've done projects, especially with the major tech firms, where we will propose something that was beyond what they requested. Often they're like, oh, actually, we want that. You know, the situation where you look at homes within your price range and then you look at one just outside of it? It's the same effect here, where once you've seen the other homes outside of your budget, you don't want the homes inside of your budget. This is kind of the same thing. So think about how you name things, how you structure things. All these things are important. I'm only going to spend a minute or two on this, but the language matters a lot. Like very often you want to be reflecting the language back. Quite often when consultants will talk about the benefits of their services and what they offer, they talk about these broad goals like increasing revenue, reducing support costs, growing brand awareness, increasing market share. But you want to be thinking about what are the specific things that your contact, the person who makes the decision, cares about. There'll be metrics that they're held accountable to at the end of each quarter or each year, and you have to align the framing and language of the projects with that. If it's a share of voice, then you want to be aligning things in that kind of way. And this will vary tremendously by how senior they are within the organization. If it's marketing automation, then what a CMO will care about is different from a head of demand gen or the marketing manager. So you want to zero in on what are the metrics that they're held accountable to improving, and then tailor your language entirely to that. Like really think about what are the metrics they're held accountable to and use that as your language. And you can find many examples of this, but the language matters so, so much. It really, really does. If you get the language right, everything else is a lot easier. So really think about with the person that is going to be hiring you, pay attention to the language they use and what they're held accountable for. And you can ask them what metrics they care about. Because whether it's marketing or HR, different levels of the organization care about different things. So always align your language, your wording to match this. So that can be marketing, that can be HR, that can be UX, marketing, HR, and UX. But yeah, you can see plenty of examples here. But what the chief product officer will care about, maybe the roadmap is shaped by real customer needs, is different from what, say, a UX director might care about, which might be different from what a product manager cares about. So as different seniority requires different framing in how you structure your language. Okay, let me do two very quick things and I'll take some questions as well. One, if you're interested and want all my templates and articles and slides and all those things, then you can sign up to my newsletter, the paid version, because there's a lock on some of the old articles. And you get 20% off if you attended or watched this webinar using this link, richardmillington.com/promo. If you sign up now, I think it's like $5 a month or something relatively inexpensive, maybe $6 whole a month. I think it's a bargain. I think you should sign up for it because I think if you found this useful, you'll find that really useful as well. The other thing I want to talk to you about is that I'm hosting a program for a small group of people that are attending this or interested, which is a guided 4-week course. And we're going to get your niche right, your positioning, your offer, and your pricing right. If you go to cf.richardmillington.com And what I found with coaching is that people want quick results and don't want to spend 12 weeks going through the whole journey. And so, what I'm going to offer today is the opportunity to enroll in a program that is going to do this fast. We're going to work collaboratively, we're going to work together, and we're going to make sure that you've got the core foundations right. Because most of the consultants I've worked with don't have these things right. All of the slides I've used today are from this program. And so we're going to first work through weekly live group coaching sessions, structured exercises. We're going to go through all the templates, resources, session recordings if you can't attend any of these meetings live. So online, we're going to focus on first getting the niche and the market focus right, making sure that we've got the right audience that's not too small, but not too big. And there's 6 specific rules I can take you through for that. Week 2 is about positioning and authority, making sure that you position yourself exactly the right way for the kind of clients that you need to reach. Make sure you have the clear statement. You've got all the signals of authority and credibility there as well, making sure it reflects where you actually are in your journey. Make sure you have clear design and packaging in how you convey these services. Went through some of this today, but there's a lot more depth into different levels. And also today we blitzed through it really, really fast, but hopefully some of this was useful. And then the pricing fee and the strategy as well. So you covered the pricing tiers already. So you saw some of that, what that looks like. But we're going to go a lot deeper into some of the questions that some of you had here, especially with retainer-based fees, especially with making sure that you consider what to package together, what to separate apart. We're going to look at things at how you could undermine your offer as well by offering the wrong things in the wrong order. So there's a lot more we can do there as well. And what you'll walk away with is all the things you need to thrive. Honestly, if you get the foundations right, everything else becomes a lot easier. Launch this on March the 16th. So we usually be $540. But again, we've got a webinar rate for this week only. After this week, it expires. So reward for everyone that signs up early this week. If you go to webinar 20 as the coupon code, you can get a discount there. I think that's $440 actually, not $340. Yeah. But cf.richardmillington.com and you can learn more. Okay. Any questions? I think I covered everything. And please do just check this out. Even if you're not interested in joining the program today, it's worth just exploring it and seeing if and when it might be right for you. Thank you so much, everyone. That was quite a lot. Okay, I'm going to try and take as many questions as we can in the couple of minutes we have left. Thanks, Mickey. I appreciate that. Lauren, thank you. Okay, Rebecca, can you talk about fees for retainer relationships? I don't have time in this because that's a big topic. I'll do it as part of the program. I might do a separate session at some time on it, but I would love to. It's just a bigger topic that I can't squeeze in here. Sorry, Rebecca. I do think the same principle applies. Like you need to figure out what tier you're in, and those tiers are different, and it varies a lot by the organization and what you're offering as well. So if you share what service you offer, I might be able to give some thoughts here. Debbie Grobbelaar. There used to be a goalkeeper in the UK with that last name. What is the size of participants of the program? It'll be up to 20 max. We've got a few places that are taken already, 1 or 2 for the coaching folks that I have. So I think we've got around 15 people left. Yeah. Can you share the slides? I think I'll put the slides as a paid link. But if you want that, if I just go, oops, hold on. Let me just navigate back a second. So if you want the $6 option, then you go to the richardmillington.com/promo and you can get that. Thank you for the question. I'm going to try and go through as many as I can. Adrian, can you provide the promo link? So yep, did that. Gaurav Sethi, have you worked with startups that are not cash rich but will offer equity as a value-based comp? No, I don't work in that space. Honestly, I think equity is a very, very, very bad idea. And if you do that, you should accept that you probably won't get any money back because, was it 9 in 10 startups fail? So if you want to play those odds, by all means, go ahead. I wouldn't do it ever. Anna, thank you. Gilmar, will the slides be shared? Yes, but probably to just the promo folks that subscribe to the newsletter. I will share the full recording of the webinar, but I think the slide is more my IP that I'm going to charge for. Kamal, thank you. Mark, thanks so much. I appreciate that. Nikki, thank you. Ketna, thank you. David, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, the kind words are very flattering. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate that a lot. It's really nice to hear. Gareth Gordon, thank you. David, Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully, you still consider the program and the newsletter. It's been great to chat to you. I've actually really enjoyed the webinar a lot, and I really hope it helped. I really hope you took away some tips that are useful to your work in this. So thank you so much, everyone. If you have any other questions after this, feel free to reach out to me. It's been an honor to have you on the session today. Speak to you soon. Goodbye, everyone.